She was never meant to fight. At least that was what everyone believed. She was sent with no weapon, no armor, only a clipboard and quiet eyes that seemed to watch everything without blinking. The order from above had been clear. She was there. To observe, nothing more. No interference, no decisions, only notes on paper and silence on her lips, and yet from the very first day she stepped onto the forward base. Something about her presence unsettled the hardened men who had seen too many battles. The desert sun burned hot over the base. Razor wire stretched around its edges like tired scars on the earth. Prefabricated walls leaned against one another. As if they might collapse any moment, diesel fuel filled the air with its heavy smell. Sand coated every corner and made teeth grind with grit. And in the distance, mountains rose like broken knives cutting into the pale sky. The place felt temporary, hopeless and dangerous all at once. But to the special operators living inside it, it was simply another home away from home. A place where every sunrise could be the last. When the helicopter landed, the soldiers turned away from the swirling sand, shielding their eyes from the stinging storm. But she stood straight without covering her face, her boots planted firmly, her uniform plain, her hair pulled back, and her clipboard tucked under her arm. There was no rush in her steps, no hurry to move out of the rotor wash, only calm patience, as though she had learned long ago that discomfort was a luxury she could not afford. Chief Maris watched her with a frown from near the fuel depot. At 38 years old, he carried the weight of many deployments. His arms, folded, his vest hanging loose over a sweat-stained shirt, his weapon held low but always ready. He had lived long enough to know that expecting trouble was the only reason he still breathed. Beside him stood Santos, his trusted petty officer. The two men shared the same look of disbelief as the quiet woman approached. She was not an operator, not a warrior, not someone you sent into the kind of ground they called the kill zone. Yet here she was, introduced as the observer, assigned to them by orders too high to question. Her name was Rusk, Lieutenant Commander Ardan Rusk, and though she gave it with steady voice and simple formality, it did nothing to ease the doubt in Maris or Santos. Both had seen too many missions swallowed by the scar, a deadly valley to the east that had claimed more lives than they cared. To count, 3 SEAL squads had entered it, only fragments of 2 returned, and those who came back carried wounds in body and spirit. The 3rd squad remained ghosts, marked only by silent coordinates on the maps that no one wanted to look at. The scar was more than terrain. It was a predator, a bowl of stone and shadow where movement meant death. High ridges hid unseen rifles, winding wind-carved strange echoes, and no approach offered safety. The valley turned every step into a trap, every breath into a gamble, and now this quiet woman with a clipboard stood among them, promising only to observe and assess. Maris muttered to Santos under his breath, "That brass must be insane." Observers do not survive in the scar. Yet orders were orders, and the squad would carry them out, inside the tactical tent. The morning briefing felt like a funeral waiting for the coffin. Maps spread across the walls, red marks bleeding across. Grid squares, reminders of failure that no one wanted to repeat. Maris explained the dangers in blunt detail. Bravo Squad lost 4 men and retreated under fire. Delta lost 5 with the survivors barely crawling out. Echo Squad never came home. Each word landed heavy, each silence heavier still, and at the back of the room Rusk sat with her clipboard, writing with neat mechanical strokes, her face expressionless. She asked no questions, made no comments, and did not interrupt. Yet Maris noticed the way her eyes traced the contour lines of the maps, as if reading a language only she understood. When casualty numbers were mentioned, her pen paused, not with shock, but with recognition, like someone who had seen the same patterns before in another time, another place, and when choke points on the ridges were highlighted, she made small marks in her notes, subtle, quick, almost invisible, but precise. At one point, she raised her head, her voice calm as always, and asked a question no one expected. "What is the prevailing wind inside the scar?" The room went silent. Maris blinked, his mouth half open. The communications man pulled up data and replied southeast to northwest, updrafts in day, downdrafts at night, but he asked why. She only nodded, wrote it down, and returned to silence. It was a strange moment, one that made the chief uneasy because she had asked like she already knew the answer and only wanted to see if they did too. That night the base was heavy with ritual. Men wrote letters to wives, and children tucked photographs into footlockers, recorded messages on small devices. Every operator prepared for silence, even while they planned for success. It had become routine before missions into the scar, one last chance to say goodbye, though never spoken aloud, and even Maris, who rarely allowed sentiment, left instructions for where his ashes should rest if he never returned. It was their way of accepting the cost before stepping into the unknown, and through it all, Rusk remained. Quiet, her clipboard still in hand, her presence steady, her face unreadable. The squad told themselves she was just an observer, that she would stay behind on the ridge while they entered the scar. Yet a seed of doubt had already been planted, because when she had asked about the wind, her eyes had carried something deeper, something that spoke of memory, and Chief Maris could not shake the feeling that this woman was not what she seemed. The morning came with heavy silence, the desert sky pale and unchanging, the air already warm with the rising sun. Soldiers moved with routine discipline, checking rifles, loading magazines, tightening straps, every man preparing with the grim knowledge that the scar had swallowed others before them. Every step, every breath could be their last. Yet they moved with steady hands, because that was what survival demanded. The convoy rolled out at first light, 3 vehicles moving in formation, the lead a mine-resistant truck scarred with dents and burns from past encounters, behind it a Humvee filled with men carrying the weight of too many memories, and at the rear dirt bikes ready to scout, engines growling like restless animals. The ground beneath them broken rock and twisted brush, as if the land itself wanted to resist their passage. Shadows stretched long and sharp across the valley floor, and dust rose with every turn of the tires. To the surprise of the team, Rusk sat in the passenger seat of the Humvee, her rucksack at her feet, her face turned toward the horizon, no clipboard. Now no pen in her hand, only eyes that never stopped scanning. The SEALs exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves, wondering why she had insisted on coming along. Observers usually stayed behind at the base, or at least waited on the ridge, not inside the danger zone itself, but when Maris challenged her before they left, she only said she planned to watch from the optimal vantage point, her calm tone leaving no space for argument. The ride was long and tense. No one told jokes, no one relaxed, only sharp voices over the radio with position reports and equipment checks. The desert seemed endless, its silence broken only by the rumble of engines and the occasional caw of a bird startled into flight. Rusk noticed everything, the faint movement of dust in the distance, the sudden shift of a shadow against stone, the cry of a hawk circling high above. She studied the world like every detail might reveal a secret, like she had learned long ago that the smallest sign could mean survival or death. As the convoy approached the ridge overlooking the scar, the men grew quiet. Even the radios carried only short-clipped updates because everyone knew what waited below. The scar stretched out like a wound carved deep into the land, its ridges sharp, its slopes steep, its shadows too dark. It looked calm from a distance, but it had claimed more lives than anyone wanted to count. From above it seemed almost peaceful, but the men knew the truth. It was a trap built by nature and perfected by hidden hands, a place where soldiers disappeared into silence. The vehicles stopped, forming a defensive ring. Men dismounted, weapons at the ready, scanning the horizon for threats. Maris gave orders. With firm voice, his words carrying authority and weight, Echo Squad would move down into the scar. Radios checked every 15 minutes, no one alone, eyes sharp at all times. The observer would stay on the ridge, safe behind cover, keeping watch. Rusk nodded without protest and moved to her position behind a rocky outcrop that gave her a wide view of the valley below. She pulled a pair of binoculars from her rucksack and began scanning with steady patience. The men made their final checks, hands running over magazines, adjusting straps, tugging on helmets, every movement slow and precise, each operator fighting the thought that 3 other squads had done the same thing here and never returned whole. Still, they went forward, because that was the mission. Bring home the missing, hold the line, prove the scar could not break them. Maris gave the signal, and the squad began to descend, boots crunching on loose stone, shadows swallowing them, step by step, until they were no more than figures drifting into the mouth of the valley. 15 minutes later, the first radio check came, the voice of Maris steady, Echo 1 to Overwatch, entering target area, no contact. Proceeding to first. Checkpoint, Rusk answered calmly. Overwatch copies, maintain schedule. Her voice held no fear, only quiet certainty. The squad moved deeper, and for a while the radios carried steady updates. Checkpoint secured, no visible threats. Moving to grid reference, every word clean and professional. But then came the break. 45 minutes in the radio crackled with heavy static, Maris's. Voice came through broken, words chopped by interference, echoed to Overwatch. Something's wrong, cannot identify. And then silence. Rusk switched channels, tried 3 different frequencies, called them again and again, her voice calm but urgent. No answer came, only the hiss of empty air and the faint whisper of wind moving through stone. She lowered the radio, lifted the binoculars, and scanned. The scar with sharp eyes. At first she saw nothing, only the same rocks and dust, the same ridges and brush. But then, slowly, shapes emerged. Too still, too deliberate. Shadows pressed against stone, hidden fighters waiting. Their rifles trained on the squad below. Through the glass, she saw the SEALs, standing frozen, rifles lowered, their shoulders heavy, their faces set with the weight of inevitability. They were surrendering. The finest operators America had sent into this land were standing down, caught in a trap they could not fight, giving up to an enemy no one could see. Her jaw tightened, her hands steady, and then she reached for her rucksack. But what she pulled from it was not a clipboard, not paper, not harmless tools of an observer. Instead, it was a suppressed rifle, a tactical harness worn and scarred from past use, a sidearm with scratches that told old stories. She loaded her weapons with practiced precision, each motion smooth, automatic, as though her hands remembered what her mouth had denied. She had not asked for permission. She had not waited for orders. She stood, slung her harness, and began to walk, not down into the valley where the trap was closing, but up the opposite ridge toward ground that looked impossible to climb, because she understood what the others did not, that to fight the scar you could not follow its rules, you had to change them. The climb was merciless, loose stones shifting under every step, sharp ridges cutting at her hands as she pulled herself higher. The scar below stretched wide like a hungry mouth waiting to swallow the squad whole. The SEALs stood frozen, rifles slack in their hands, enemies hidden in the rocks surrounding them, silent and patient like hunters watching prey lose hope. But Rusk did not falter, her breathing steady, her movements careful, every choice measured with the instinct of someone who had done this many times before. The ridge offered no easy path, only jagged stone and steep drops, yet she moved with precision, using every shadow, every dip in the rock, her body pressed low, her rifle held tight against her chest. She was not rushing, she was stalking, her eyes sharp, reading the land as if the terrain itself whispered secrets to her. Years of training buried under the label of logistics revealed themselves in her calm rhythm, the kind of rhythm that turned impossible climbs into silent approaches. Below her, the squad remained surrounded. The enemy had the advantage, perfect positions carved by nature and refined by patience. They had watched the SEALs enter, funneled them into the open, and now held them in place without firing a single shot. The tactic was cruel. It broke the spirit before breaking the body, forcing surrender without wasting ammunition. But Rusk had seen these tactics before. She knew how men who thought they were safe on high ground often became overconfident, and she planned to use that arrogance against them. Her first target came into view, a lone fighter lying prone behind a rock outcrop, his scope fixed on the Americans below, his attention complete. Blind to everything else, she crouched behind the ridge above him, her rifle already aligned. The suppressed shot whispered into the air. The man collapsed without a sound, his rifle slipping uselessly. To the dirt she did not stop to watch. She was already moving, sliding low across the ridge toward the next position. The second nest was more dangerous, a small cave carved into the rock, two men inside, their voices low as they muttered in a language she knew well enough to understand the words, trap, surrender. Victory! Their confidence filled the cave, but confidence could not stop steel. She pulled a grenade from her harness, counted seconds in her head, rolled it inside, then pressed flat against the stone. The blast thundered across the ridge. Dust billowed out, silence followed, and she kept climbing. Her radio hissed in her ear, static mixed with faint voices, Santos calling, Maris shouting, but she ignored it. The mission had already changed. There was no time for orders, no time for doubt. She knew where the third position would be: the chimney nest, the highest point overlooking the scar, a perfect place for a sniper to control the valley. But reaching it meant exposing herself across open ground. No cover, no shadows, only speed and precision. She sprinted low. Her feet sure, her rifle steady, the sniper inside the chimney turned too late, his weapon swiveling toward her, but she was faster. 3 shots in controlled rhythm, chest, then head. The man slumped, his weapon clattering down the rock. Echoes carried the sound across the valley. And for the first time in months, the scar did not belong to its hidden killers. It belonged to her. Down below, the SEALs heard the shift, rifle cracks above them, explosions in the ridges, the invisible grip that held them suddenly weakened. Maris raised his head, eyes wide, whispering into his radio, "Someone's up there. Someone's clearing the nests." Santos tried to call Overwatch, his voice urgent. "Overwatch, what is your status?" Silence answered for a long moment. Then her voice came, calm as stone. Opposition neutralized. Continue mission. Grid 4-7. Charlie secure. The men stared at one another, shock on their faces. Santos demanded answers. Who is neutralizing it? Who the hell is up there? The pause stretched. Then her voice again, steady, firm. I am. Nothing more, nothing less. The truth hit Maris like cold iron. The quiet woman with the clipboard, the one they had dismissed as a burden, was now tearing apart the trap that had destroyed 3 squads, and she was doing it alone. More shots echoed, another nest falling, another explosion rolling through the valley. The enemy who had seemed untouchable were now scrambling. Their advantage burned away one position at a time. The SEALs felt the weight lift from their shoulders. Their rifles rose again, strength. Returning, they pushed forward, not broken, not surrendering because they knew someone above was fighting for them, someone who refused to accept defeat. Rusk kept moving, every kill precise, every approach methodical, her body low, her eyes sharp. She was a shadow of war climbing across the scar, the hidden hunter who turned hunters into prey. The ridge was no longer safe for the enemy. It was a battlefield under her control. She did not shout, she did not cheer, she only worked, silent and relentless. Because she knew that one mistake could undo everything, by the time she reached the last ridge, smoke drifted in thin lines from destroyed nests. The valley echoed with silence, not of surrender, but of fear. The enemy had lost their unseen power. Their trap was broken. The SEALs below lifted their heads. Their leader whispered into the comms, Echo 1 copies, moving forward, his voice steadier now, no longer the voice of a man about to die, but of a man fighting again. And through it all, Rusk never stopped, never slowed, because in her mind, the mission was not survival, it was victory. And victory only came when the last shadow had been cleared from the scar. The scar was no longer silent. Echoes of gunfire rolled across the stone ridges. Smoke drifted in thin waves. The hidden nests that had once controlled the valley now burned or lay abandoned. For the first time in 6 long months, the valley that had devoured squads of America's finest was losing its grip. And the men inside it could feel the shift, their fear slowly turning into fire again. Maris pushed his squad forward, his voice sharper now, orders crisp, the weight of surrender replaced. With the spark of survival, the SEALs moved from cover to cover, rifles steady, eyes fierce, because they knew someone above was fighting for them, someone they had misjudged, the mysterious observer who carried no orders, no weapon in sight when she first arrived, was. Now their unseen shield Rusk moved like a shadow along the ridge, every step controlled, every shot deliberate. She did not fire wildly. She struck only when needed, precision that came from years of practice hidden behind the mask of logistics. Her suppressed rifle whispered again and again, each sound meaning another enemy would not rise. She did not stop to speak. She did not pause to explain. She simply worked, and her work carved open a path through the scar. Santos whispered into the comms, awe in his voice. I cannot believe this. Who is she? What is she really? But Rusk did not answer, her silence more powerful than any explanation. Maris only said to his men, It does not matter who she is. What matters is she is saving us. Keep moving. The squad obeyed, their boots crunching. Against gravel, their eyes fixed on the ridges above, waiting for the next explosion, the next rifle crack. Each sound giving them courage, then came the discovery. Grid 47. Charlie, the coordinates where 2 missing operators had last signaled days ago, the squad approached cautiously, hearts heavy, because they had prepared themselves to find only silence and loss. But instead they found a shallow cave hidden behind brush, and inside lay Martinez and Chen, alive though broken, bodies weakened by wounds and days without help. Their breaths shallow, eyes barely opening but still alive, it felt like a miracle carved from despair. The medics rushed forward, Kowalski kneeling at once, checking wounds, patching where he could, whispering encouragement into ears that barely heard. Maris felt his chest tighten with relief, because for weeks he had lived with the weight of failure. And now, against all odds, his men were not ghosts, but breathing fighters. He looked up toward the ridge where Rusk moved unseen, and for the first time allowed himself a silent prayer of thanks. But the fight was not finished. The enemy still lingered. In scattered positions, though their control was broken, they were not gone. Small bursts of fire snapped across the valley, stray shots that sought to wound and kill. The SEALs returned fire with renewed strength, pushing toward extraction. Every man alive mattered now. They would not leave anyone behind. Not again. Not after what the scar had taken before, above them. Rusk pressed forward, her shoulder bleeding, from a scrape where rock had cut deep, but she ignored it. Pain was a distant thing, irrelevant when men's lives hung in the balance, her focus sharp, her rifle steady, her mind locked on clearing every last path. She threw herself across another rise, spotted 2 fighters moving into position, and cut them down before they could even raise their rifles. Her movements fluid, efficient, without waste. The valley thundered with the sudden roar of engines, the extraction helicopter finally approaching, blades chopping the air, dust and sand. Rising in a swirling storm, its shadow sweeping across stone, Maris waved his men to prepare. Covering Martinez and Chen as the medics carried them toward the pickup point, Santos shouted coordinates, marking safe landing ground. The men fought off the last desperate bursts of fire while the helicopter descended, its machine gun sweeping. across the rocks to silence remaining threats. Rusk appeared at the edge of the ridge, her silhouette sharp against the sky. She descended toward the valley slowly. Methodically, her rifle slung across her chest, her sidearm drawn. She moved like she had all the time in the world, calm in the middle of chaos. The seals covered her as she crossed open ground, bullets sparking off stone near her boots. But nothing slowed her, nothing forced her to run. She walked steady until she reached the squad, her face unreadable, her voice calm as ever when she finally spoke. Mission complete. Status green. The helicopter's bay doors opened wide, the wounded loaded first, medics pulling them inside, then. The squad climbed aboard, one after another, their bodies covered in sweat and dust, but their hearts beating strong, alive against all odds, alive. Maris stood at the ramp, watching as Rusk stepped aboard last, blood soaking her sleeve, dust coating her face, yet her eyes carried no weakness. Only the calm certainty that had guided her every move. As the helicopter lifted from the valley floor, the scar shrank beneath them, a gaping wound left behind. Still dangerous, still merciless, but no longer invincible, the men looked down at the place that had nearly ended them, now broken by the work of one woman who refused to surrender. Silence filled the cabin, not relief alone, but awe. Because no one truly understood who she was or how she had done what 3 full squads could not. Maris stared at her across the cabin, his voice quiet yet demanding. "You are not logistics, are you?" Rusk looked back at him, her face calm, her lips closed, giving no answer. Santos leaned forward, eyes narrow. "Then what are you?" Her silence remained, unbroken, her only response to sit down, close her eyes for a moment and breathe steady, as though she had done nothing unusual at all, as though saving a squad from certain death was simply another task on a long-forgotten list.